feel sad for our country. I feel sad for everybody. You don't like the guy, don't vote for him. Don't kill him. We love the guy. We're going to vote for him.
You know, that close with a ladder, and all these people saw it, and the Secret Service, they're like, what is that? It's not crazy to think that there was something there. It was an effort to kill Trump, and it wasn't just a lone gunman.
Secret Service said, we warned Trump. Stop holding outdoor rallies, they said. So it's Trump's fault again. You're gonna get yourself shot, Trump. Some people wondering whether there is a second shooter who was there on the day that Trump was nearly assassinated. And we don't know much about the actual shooter who was allegedly solely responsible for this, but I want to tease out some possibilities for how this all went down. And so, of course, the standard narrative that we've heard thus far is that there was just a lone single shooter and that we have that person's actual identity, that we know who he is. They told us his name is Crooks, and that's the end of the story. He was not acting with anybody. He was not under a handler with the CIA or any other foreign intelligence agency, and he was just a disturbed individual. He tried to shoot Trump, got killed. That's the end of it. Now, very interesting from our perspective, because we don't know much about the guy. He's 20 years old. A lot of stories out there that he's bullied and he's been harassed at school. We saw some very strange clips from some so-called classmates who didn't even seem authentic or real to me, seemed like just some kids who wanted to talk to the media, but they're giving us this, right? The media, I think, is going to probably try to keep it limited to this, as we just heard from the prior woman on CNN. Now, this could be real. We talked about this before, and I actually articulated the math here for us, but if we consider this concept of the law of big numbers, these things, I think, are possible, right? They do happen, and they can be lone shooters if you just think about it in terms of the math. So in the United States, we have 330 million people, and if you just say 1% of those people, so if you just think about this in your life, you know, of all the people you've met ever in your entire life, are 1% of those people a little bit off? The answer, yeah, probably, right? 1%, maybe it's more than that, maybe it's less, but just use that number, 1%. So we'll say of all 330 million people in the United States, there's a small percentage of people who are just not well. And I say crazies with all due respect, but it's 3.3 million people who would be in that number. So then if you say of those 3.3 million people, let's say of those crazy people, there's about 1% of those crazies who are actually capable of pulling a gun and getting a gun and operating a gun and coordinating what it takes to do something like this. That's still 33,000 people. And even if you say, okay, maybe a third of those people would actually be willing to do it, now we're still talking about 10,000 people. So the numbers are huge. And so if you just think about that, it's big numbers. And so the possibility that, yeah, it's a random aberration, or there's still 10,000, 30,000 people who might be willing to do this, especially when you have their brains pumped full of Trump's a Nazi, American democracy is ending, Liz Cheney and Rachel Maddow smashing their foreheads into the insurrection word every single night for the last 3.5 years, right? You can understand that. Some people can go unwell, and that could be it. That is a realm of possibility, and it's something that we can consider and review. Now, there's also some ideas that maybe we did have a single shooter, but we just have a bad ID on the shooter. And I think that the shooter was originally ID'd from the gun. So they traced the gun back to the father who actually purchased the gun, and they connected that to the ID of the young man. And so now we're asking ourselves about the gun serial number, and about the actual ID that's been disclosed to all of us. Some people are saying that maybe it was a single shooter, but we just have the wrong person, and that there's someone else that has a lot more background who is actually behind the shooting. Now, we don't know, obviously, so all of this is speculation, so take it with a grain of salt. This came over from Roger Stone, and Roger Stone shared this. He said, in an inadvertently deleted tweet earlier, he says, credible sources insist that the shooter in the assassination is someone else, actually, right? It was someone named Maxwell Yeerick, and that Maxwell Yeerick was already a Trump protester who was sent to jail. And so, we're not trying to smear anybody, but this was, of course, an article about Maxwell Yeerick, who almost resembles the person who was deceased on the rooftop. And say 2 Pittsburgh men have already pleaded guilty. They've been sentenced to 12 months in Allegheny County Jail. And so there's some theories like this floating around. I'm not saying that they're accurate or legitimate. I'm just saying that there are some theses that there were more than one people, or that the identities are off, and that we have a misidentified person. We also have another theory that there was a water tower shooter. There was another actual shooter who was there on the scene, and we'll follow all of that up with this clip from CNN where they're explaining that audio forensics suggest that there were as many as 3 weapons that were fired at the Trump rally. So was that shooter, counter sniper team 1, counter sniper team 2, which might make sense, or was it shooter 1, shooter 2, and counter sniper, or something? We don't know. And if it was a second shooter, why wasn't that second shooter taken out? And how did 2 shooters miss, if that's the case?
Fence where the other shooter was. There was one I heard in the water tower. There was one by the fence.
All right, so one by the water tower, one by the fence, and she was not alone. There was also this woman who was explaining the same thing. This came clipped over from Joy Reborn, and she posted this. Says, why is no one asking about the water tower? Right here was another exchange from this woman where she's explaining that she he also was looking at the water tower. So another part of the investigation that we're asking about.
Shot to the left. He killed the gentleman in the water tower here. Now, when I called my husband at home, who's watching TV, he said, I thought Trump hurt his ear when he went to the ground. But he said, no, on TV they showed before Trump hit the ground, the ear was bleeding. So that sharpshooter went across. Trump turned his head. His ear must have been nipped, and it killed somebody in the stands over to the left.
Could you see anyone injured besides the blood on the former president?
All I saw was the gentleman from Beaver County who spoke earlier in the day. He was running for the State House Representative, Elmore, I know his name. He had a white shirt on, and I saw him come from that left stands where the people were mostly shot. I think there were several. They said 3 medevacs left here. He wasn't shot, but you could see that he was next to somebody who must have been bleeding profusely because he either helped them and rubbed against them or tried to get them help or something. It was covered. So I knew that he was near somebody. That was my first indication that somebody was actually shot when I saw his blood on his shirt.
Aaron, when did you realize that, hey, this might not be fireworks, this might be something else?
When they got Trump down on the ground. We were just so concerned that he wasn't hit because we couldn't. It happened so fast. It's really hard to process it. I guess if you have it on your camera to see the exact minute, you can tell. But when he got up, he did not look bad at all. What I've heard coming out here is now they feel that there was 2 shooters on both sides. So they got the one on the tower on this side, but the one on the right side they never got. So that's why they wanted us to leave immediately because they thought there's still a shooter out there somewhere. So
wow.
Be in these woods around Butler. And I feel sad for our country. I feel sad for everybody. You don't like the guy, don't vote for him. Don't kill him. We love the guy. We're going to vote for him. What is up with his violence? It's just terrible.
Yeah, and they're celebrating it at Tenacious D concerts.
I'm glad that guy's no longer with us anymore in that tower. And I hope they get the other one too. And I hope they don't nick him. I hope they get him. He's down.
Get the other one too. So that woman is saying that there were at least initial reports, right? Secret Service is running around saying, hey, get out of here, right? Evacuate. Somebody over here, maybe they hear them. Is there over there too? Second shooter over there? They're going to go track that guy down, screaming a bunch of stuff. Who knows whether it's true or not? But man, that's an interesting exchange. So we'll see if that continues on. But we see some interesting corroboration happening. So this was what CNN was reporting for us. You can see this is from their most latest updates. From July 15th, they tell us audio forensics suggests that as many as 3 weapons were fired at the Trump rally. So we all thought definitely 2, the shooters and the counter shooters, but were there 2 counter shooters or were there 2 shooters? Forensic analysis suggests that as many as 3 weapons were fired at the Trump rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. The FBI said on Sunday that the shooter acted alone. The first 3 shots were consistent with an alleged weapon A, and the next 5 were consistent with an alleged weapon B. So 3 from the shooter, theoretically. Weapon B shot back, maybe? And the final acoustic impulse was emitted by a possible weapon C. So what was that? Forensic analysis suggests that as many as 3 weapons were fired. The first 3 shots were consistent with the alleged weapon A, the next 5 were consistent with the alleged weapon B, and the final acoustic impulse was emitted by a possible weapon C. Now that came per audio analysis from Caitlin Gregoris, the National Center for the Media Forensics at University of Colorado, Denver, and this other guy, Cole Whitecotton, Senior Professorial Research Associate. Audio analysis also confirmed that the gunman was about 360 to 393 feet from the podium, according to forensics expert Robert Maurer. The conclusion aligns with CNN's analysis that the gunman was on the rooftop about 393 to 492. The shots exemplify a crack pop sequence typical when a supersonic bullet passes a microphone before the arrival of the corresponding muzzle blast sound. He teaches audio forensics. Now, the time between those markers places the shooter 110 to 120 meters from the microphone, Maurer said. Assuming the bullet is moving at an average speed of 8 to 1,000 meters per second, that's the equivalent of 2,600 or 3,280 feet per second. So 3 different weapons is what they hear, and we heard those 3 different groupings too. So weapon A, weapon B, and weapon C. So we have either 2 shooters or 2 counter snipers. And if we have 2 shooters, we only have 1 dead one. So we're missing a shooter. And if we have 2 counter shooters, 2 counter snipers, we need to know who that second team was. So audio forensics suggesting as many as 3 weapons were fired, and that raises a lot of questions. Now, some people are prognosticating, thinking that maybe this is not just a single shooter or other people involved in this. In fact, Tucker Carlson, you know him, he made that very point in this interview with the Heritage Foundation.
At some point we may find out what happened on Saturday. A guy with a rifle wound up on a building, that close with a ladder, and all these people saw it, and the Secret Service are like, what is that? It's not crazy to think that there was something there. It was an effort to kill Trump. It wasn't just a lone gunman.
Yeah, so great ideas from Tucker. And so this is another tweet from this fella. His name is Clay Martin. He says, guys, I'm quite serious. I'm like half a step away from assuming a second shooter theory. Too much went right to get some idiot to spot 125 yards distant. Ain't no way this was the primary and only plan. And it looks like a plan. Looks like some people are even signaling other people, says this guy. The theories continue to abound, and we know that now some are saying this was maybe an Iranian plot, which will be perfect because they can't wait to use some excuse to blow up Iran. So here is what has happened now. We learned that the Secret Service, so apparently all this happened with high intensity Secret Service. They ramped up their security after receiving intel of an Iranian plot to assassinate Trump, and he still got shot. Now, none of this has any connection to the shooting, but U.S. authorities obtained intelligence from a human source in recent weeks on a plot by Iran to try to assassinate Trump. There's no indication that Thomas Matthew Crooks, the would-be assassin, was connected to the plot, but the existence of an intelligence threat from a hostile foreign intelligence agency, Iran, I was saying it should be Putin, right? I can't believe it's not Putin because maybe they would just nuke Putin now, raises new questions about the security lapses at the Saturday rally. But, Ukraine was like way 2023. So a U.S. national security official said that the Secret Service and the Trump campaign were made aware. It says Secret Service learned of the increased threat from that threat system and directly contacted Secret Service at a senior level. In response, Secret Service surged resources and assets for the protection of former president. All of this was in advance of Saturday. So in other words, they increased security and Trump was still shot, but it wasn't the Iranians. It's like, my gosh, thank gosh the Iranians didn't actually try anything, because if they were actually competent, maybe they would have been successful. So the Trump campaign would not disclose whether it was made aware of the debt, of this threat. We don't talk about this stuff, they said. Secret Service said, we warned Trump. Stop holding outdoor rallies, they said. So it's Trump's fault again. You're gonna get yourself shot, Trump, which pose greater risks than events which the agency can better control access. Yeah, I know, it's Trump's fault for being outside, right? You guys can't put a team on the roof over there? The Secret Service and other agencies are constantly receiving new potential threat information, said Anthony Guglielmi. Says an agency spokesman, we can't comment on any specific threats. At one point during the cycle, the campaign stopped holding spontaneous off-the-record events with guests who weren't swept by the Secret Service, and the FBI is going to be diving into this, getting to the bottom of it. They said the investigation's ongoing. But at this time, law enforcement has reported that their investigation has not identified any ties between the shooter and any accomplice or co-conspirator or foreign or domestic. The permanent mission of the Islamic Republic of Iran denied that there was any plot to assassinate Trump, and the accusations are unsubstantiated and malicious, they said. Stop blaming us and trying to blow us up. So, all right, the Iranian plot looks like, Mike Pompeo was also a target of an assassination plot, I'm sure. All right, so that is from CNN. Of course, it is the Iranians, and the second shooter thesis continues to develop. We'll see if there is any more inquiry on this. We know guys like Representative Corey Mills are hinting that maybe there was some intentionality behind this. If there wasn't a second shooter, maybe there was some willful negligence, some intentionality behind allowing the shooting to take place in the first place.